This is a remake of the video I made in 2006. I'm just changing the music because the musicians didn't approve of my use of it. That's looking towards Atlantis, and I'm going to do a dive.
This is Athol Island. This is Paradise Island. This is Nassau. This is the area of Paradise Island, which was the beginning of the sea gardens and a nursery for beautiful tropical fish. It was landfilled in the late 50s, early 60s. It later became Paradise Island Airways landing strip and now has large multi-million-dollar homes set on it. And of course the golf course area. This is the proposed area of Athol Island, which is to be filled and a harbor put in for a ferry service.
Since found this in my files, which shows how extensive the landfill was supposed to be.
This film includes a dive observation from this area of reef on along behind the island, and then later another shoot was done from this beach along this shoreline where we found seaweed beds. Approximately here are seaweed beds. Seaweed beds are also along here, and all through the middle area is a sponge nursery and also a conch nursery, including whelks, sea urchins, all sorts of living things that coexist in this area of fill. Obviously this area of fill will affect the whole Sea Gardens area, but this area will be completely covered. This is Paradise Island in the process of being landfilled back in the late 50s, early 60s, with Athol Island in the background. This is later what was done to Paradise Island in 2000.
You may see this is very dead, and yes, there was a major die-off when Atlantis was built. They had to dig out a huge hole and constantly pump water into the ocean, which was full of silt. Not only that, but when you get down in the lower levels of the sandstone, there was all sorts of bacteria and sulfur and all kinds of toxins to the ocean. And in fact, I was told by someone from the trust after they took their $1 million payoff that they were really ashamed when they flew over and saw what was happening. All the sediment, you could see it flowing out into the Great Bahama Bank. And what that did was not only kill the corals of Nassau Harbor, but spread all the way as far as the Exumas, because this dust would settle and then storms would come and kick it up again, and the tide, depending which way it was going, would continue to carry it towards the Exumas. Obviously, some of it was going off into deep water with the inflow and outflow on the Bahama Bank, but anyway, fish still live here. There's some bleaching occurring, and there was a major bleaching epidemic. And in defense of Atlantis, I can say that at the same time, by some strange coincidence, there was a worldwide major coral die-off at the same time, blamed on maybe extreme ocean temperatures, and they really couldn't quite figure out what it is or what it was, but I think nowadays they've come to different conclusions. And one hope is that certain corals, like you see these that are still surviving, will be the survival of the fittest, and will hopefully, if we can slow down our pollution rate and acidification of the ocean, we can get the corals that are stronger to multiply and inhabit the oceans. Anyway, to be more specific on this video, these are stands of seaweed, which, as a kid, I used to wonder, where does this seaweed come from? There it is. It grows off the bottom and eventually it breaks loose, and we see it on our beaches. And it has little floats. Those little balls are like air balls that hold it up off the bottom. Starfish, and they eat sponges and things. You'll see the stomach that they take out and put onto things to eat. And I've even seen them eating uh, sea biscuits. That's a very adolescent fish. I was wondering which it was, whether that was a rock beauty, baby rock beauty. You'll notice on the video there are a lot of young grouper, very young grouper. There's very little mangroves there. There was a small stand up where years ago this area was called the Boneyard, where old boats were put to rest, and where they stuck the boats was right at the entrance of that little kind of a creek, but not really a creek, but a little place that mangroves were hanging in years ago. Anyway, there's not much left of the mangroves, but it's interesting to note that in these shallow waters, grouper do spend their young life and then move into deeper water later on, even though I'm pointing out that it's not always mangroves that are the breeding area for young fish, but I shouldn't say breeding area, maybe early development stages of fish often happen in the shallows. Although I've seen them, in relatively deeper water where my reef was, I've seen baby grouper on occasion. They do like to have protection. Anyway, there's still coral living here. And I was concerned that the landfill was just going to destroy all of this. Atlantis said they were going to actually pick up these reefs and move them out away from the landfill to save them, which, could be done, but it sure would be disturbing nature in a big way, and you'd be moving the reefs into deeper water in a different location. So I'm not sure how great that is. I do realize that development, nature has to sacrifice for development. But anyway, there's more seaweed. I think at some point I stick the camera out of the water to show you where I am in the bay. And it's amazing when you look at the sea, you can find that in places that you think are completely dead and barren, if you look closely, you see life. Yeah. Sea urchins. In Japan, they eat the eggs of the sea urchin. Actually, as a boy, my father used to teach me how to eat them. In Japan, it's called uni. Actually, I have amazing footage of sea urchins making babies, squirting their eggs and sperm out into the ocean. It was pretty special. This is quite unusual. This coral is usually flat. All of a sudden, it seems to be growing up. That's quite amazing. this a swimming clam because they can swim. Longusta lobster or spiny lobster. Technically, it's against the law, I understand, to spear in the harbor. I'm not sure whether a snare would be considered illegal since it's not a spear. In Bermuda, the only way you're allowed to catch lobster is with a snare. This way you can properly measure them before killing them and to make sure they're completely legal. Once you've speared a lobster, it's really too late. This is a very interesting sponge. I've seen them down in the Exumas living in large clusters. I don't think it's known how important sponges are to the environment. For every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when the sponging industry removed the sponges from the ocean, uh, there was definitely a reaction. I'm wondering whether the red tide had anything to do with it. They blame the red tide on the collapse of the sponge industry, but it may very well have had to do with the exploitation and removal of sponges from the environment. These are all sponges. They're well hidden. They just look like clumps of nothing of any importance and all covered in growth. You'd think they weren't a real sponge, but they are, and there were a lot of them there. These are more and more. They're filtering the ocean. This is a porcupine puffer hiding amongst some garbage that's been thrown in the area. Looks like an old chair. In Bermuda, we trained them to come and get fed. This shows the breathing of the sponge, showing the current coming out. My father was a bit of a patriot and said how one time he set up a little American flag to flap in the current of the sponge. You may find this video very long and very boring, but I shot the whole area to really show how extensive the life was in the area, instead of just shooting clip, 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 and the exciting part that we see on TV. They say that one of the reasons that our children have attention deficit is because we put things on TV that are so exciting that normal life seems to be a bore. On this part, you'll actually see the legs of the starfish. I used to get quite upset because guys used to come out and collect the starfish and inject them with formaldehyde and sell them in the straw market. We just don't quite realize that taking from the sea has to be kept in some kind of moderation so that we're not overly exploiting the ocean. There really is a question about how much are we allowed to take? How many fish should we be taking from the sea? Already we've disrupted the whole nature of the ocean. One argument is the ocean will become so polluted that we won't be able to eat the fish, so we better eat them now. But here you'll see algae growing on the seaweed right there up ahead. Algae is a big problem for corals and all sorts of things. It's caused by usually sewage in Florida, fertilizers and things like that. One of the reasons the Bahamas is so beautiful is because we don't have rivers, but because we have streets, we have gutters, they run all sorts of sediment into the ocean. So, and then the boats are also, all the boats in the harbor are dumping sewage, and this is a problem. There's no pump out stations for the Bahamas. Of course, in the United States, boats just go out to deep water and dump their sewage, and I imagine the cruise ships um, dump their sewage out to sea. And I guess they try to process it the best they can. Anyway, so algae is one of the big things that hurts corals as well as the seaweed. But a lot of the seaweed seems to be coping. In fact, it may be helping to clean out some of the issues.